If someone finds my printed computer program and starts reading it as if it was poetry, what would we say about that someone? We'd say that's absolutely nuts. What are you doing? This is exactly what the books of tafsir have done. I said, no, 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 no. I have a major problem on my hand and we need to restart. But I didn't know how to restart. So I made a lot of dua. The story turned out to be absolutely not related to what they told us. Absolutely nothing to do with what they told us. There's no sex. There are no dreams. Just a whole bunch of different issues brought up by the story as wahi to Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I started actually doing da'wah accidentally back in 1981. I was a college student in my second year. And I remember the professor in one of the courses called Cultural Studies. He was a Christian and he was very polite. And he says, I owe you a lecture or two about Islam, and yet I'm not a Muslim. So I don't feel respectful toward Islam enough to be the one teaching you about Islam. I really appreciated that sense of objectivity. So he asked, is there anyone who feels qualified? I immediately, stupidly raised my hand. And he chose me. He chose me to give the first lecture about Islam. And I ended up studying. And of course, I have been studying Islam for a long time, ever since I was barely able to read and write. My father insisted on putting us through a form of a madrasa and that kind of thing. After school madrasa, I mean. Alhamdulillah, so I was always in love with the Quran. I used to recite in a beautiful way when I was a boy. You know, I remember 8-year-old, 9-year-old, just in my room, just chanting Al-Fatiha by myself and just doing that. So I've always had an attachment to the Quran. My favorite teacher in the madrasa was the lady who used to teach us tajweed, and you know, she used to use all sorts of red colors and green colors, and so she made it a lot of fun. I used to love that whole experience. Anyway, so that's sort of the very beginning. Back in 1981, I gave my first lecture about Islam by studying really hard what to present about Islam. And I started asking myself, well, okay, I'm going to present Islam to people who will probably never remember much of what I say. So whatever I give them has to be the absolute essentials, absolute must have or must know about Islam. So I started asking myself, of course, during that lecture, I did not have enough time to answer that big question. What are later on, I got to learn that there's a word for that, الثوابت, ثوابت الإسلام. But I didn't know that word when I was in my second year of college. So it stuck in my mind. There must be a very minimal set that defines Islam. What is Islam? So that question remained in my mind. Later on, I traveled to pursue my graduate school in the United States. I did a master's degree and a PhD in computer science. All along, I was very close to the Muslim community in the city where I was. And I used to attend halaqah, and I used to attend, later on, 1985, 86, I started giving Friday khutbah because, we were all kids, just trying to help each other the best we could. One of the very touching experiences in my life happened in 1983, approximately. I remember going to the masjid one day because I missed Arabic books and I missed Quran studies and that kind of thing. So I thought, okay, I'll go to the masjid near the university. So I met this gentleman called Sayyid, an Egyptian young man. He was doing his PhD at that time. And he invited me to come to the halaqah on Friday night. So I said, sure, I'll come. So later on that evening, Friday night, I came and I found, as I entered, a very small, like old house turned into a masjid. The living room was made into a masjid. And before I enter, I hear someone reading a book, speaking out loud. I thought, oh, they started early, because I arrived right on time, and he was already reading. So I entered, and I was shocked to find him by himself, reading out loud from a book. And I thought, what a strange thing. And he welcomed me. He says, I always do this. I do the halaqah, even if no one showed up. I do the halaqah. That touched me so much, that there's someone with that much confidence, that much commitment, discipline. Anyway, fast forward, I ended up studying a lot, working with the dawah groups. I established a dawah group in the state, in the United States where I was. Eventually established masajid, different masajid, like 3 different masajid established, or was part of the group who established Islamic school that is still functioning until today. And since 1981 until about 6 years ago, I was very actively involved in the traditional Islam, but very actively involved, proactively helping the community raise funds, like I said, start Islamic school. Because of my specialization as a professional, I specialized in leadership and strategy. So there was a group called Muslim American Society, MAS, in the United States. And they got hold of my background. They learned about me, and they said, we wonder if you could help us, train some of the leadership around the United States. So I started training them, going to different cities, different conferences, doing different training programs, leadership programs, all within traditional, conservative Sunni Islam. Until 2016, approximately, I ended up with some crisis. In my second year of college, I started doing da'wah by accident. So I started asking a very basic fundamental question, ما هي ثوابت الإسلام? Because I was introducing Islam to a group of people who probably will not remember anything. So I wanted to give them something that may stick in their mind, the basics, the absolute essential. And I couldn't find an easy answer at that time. So I did the best I could. But later on, that question remained in my mind. What are the absolute essential? Later on, much faster, fast forward, when I stayed in the United States, got married, had children, my children grew up, and I was facing teenager problems, as we all face with teenagers. Yeah. I kept asking myself, okay, what are the basic essentials I expect from my kids? And I didn't have a good answer. I looked around, like, is salat in this form or that form part of the essentials? Or is a specific definition of zakat? What about hajj? Are these all essentials? Or is there a minimum set of essentials? Like what struck my mind at that time was the ayah, right? These 3 things seem to be فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Okay, is that the basic set of essentials? I don't know. So I kept asking. Anyway, so ever since 1981, I was asking that question, but for about 35 years, I was fully involved with da'wah and supporting the community and supporting the flow of Islam. And alhamdulillah, many people became Muslims with my help, and so on and so forth. Until about, I helped start Islamic schools that are still operating. I helped start masajid that are still operating. Starting in the late 1990s or early 21st century, meaning early 2000, I started doing training to the leadership of an organization in the United States, national organization in the United States called MAS, M-A-S. And their leadership needed training in leadership, which was my specialization. So I just started doing all sorts of training. And, then September 11 happened. Then 2002, my responsibilities changed. And to make long story short, the important thing is that my whole career in Islamic da'wah has been with traditional Islam. My professional career is computer science. I have a PhD in computer science with advanced studies, with a lot of papers published. And, very logical minded, very scientifically grounded. I understand science very, very, very well. So I joined both of these worlds, alhamdulillah, without missing a beat. In my own private library, I had literally hundreds of references that I've accumulated over the years. So I've known Islam from a traditional Sunni Islam very, very well. And I used to give khutbah since 85, halaqah every week since that time, until I came to about 2016 approximately, where I had a personal faith crisis, which went back to the very first initial question, which was, what are the absolute essentials of Islam? We can disagree about all of the details, the partial issues, al-furu'. ولكن ما هي الثوابت? I asked myself after this crisis, by the way, just to let you know, 2016 was 10 years after my divorce, and I lost touch with my own kids. I was in Saudi Arabia, and a very difficult time for me. And I kept asking myself, okay, I'm about to die. What is the half an hour lecture I should give to my kids? And I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find a very consistent, coherent, logical, easy to apply, simple message that I could leave with my kids for them to find their way back to quote unquote traditional Islam. There is no traditional Islam, as you know. There are hundreds of factions of Muslims. So it left me with a crisis. I said, that can't be. And then I started studying the Quran. Long story short, my favorite surah in the whole Quran at that time was Surah Yusuf. And I knew it inside out. I had memorized it. I had listened to it, not hundreds of times, thousands of times. And I know every word. I know every question you can ask. Why is there a missing wow in here? Why this ayah doesn't tell us who is speaking? I have hundreds of questions about it. 2018, I started asking more questions, like doubting questions. And I felt guilty. Why am I asking these questions? Because Surah Yusuf brought me back to the Quran. There's an ayah, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي يُوسُفَ وَإِخْوَتِهِ آيَاتٌ لِلسَّائِلِينَ. So I said, Allah is encouraging us to ask questions. Why am I feeling guilty? Why did they make me feel guilty about asking questions? These questions are not questions of doubt. These are questions of seeking closeness to Allah. Al-qurb min Allah. Ayatun lis-sa'ilin. And then I read in another ayah that the bad people, يَوْمَئِذٍ هُمْ لَا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. They don't even ask questions at that day of punishment. That means when you don't ask questions, that's a form of punishment. So it started changing my mind. It started I felt 2018, 2019, I felt my mind is being put in a blender and everything is being rearranged. So in 2016, 2018, when I had that crisis, I decided to leave a translation for my kids, translation of the Quran, because I was not satisfied with the translations, English translations. So I said, okay, let's start with Surah Yusuf. So I got to that ayah, وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. راودته. I looked up in the translation, I looked up in the books of tafsir. كل كتب التفاسير، كل كتب الترجمات قالت أغرته. They said she enticed him sexually. صح؟ كلنا نعرف هذا الشيء. Okay, ترجمتها. I translated it that way. I continued. Then وجاء إخوة يوسف فدخلوا عليه فعرفهم وهم له منكرون. فلما جهزهم بجهازهم قال ائتوني بأخ لكم من أبيكم ألا ترون أني أوفي الكيل وأنا خير المنزلين. I stopped on that one. خير المنزلين. I thought المنزل الذي أنزل هو الله. What is he saying? أنا خير المنزلين. There's a question. How do I translate it? How do I translate this? Okay, I continued. قالوا سنراود عنه أباه. نراود عنه أباه. راودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسه. I said, how am I going to translate this one? Are they going to entice the father sexually? No way. I hope it's clear. There's something major wrong. If you claim there are two different meanings, it means whoever wrote this doesn't know Arabic. Because he uses the same word one way in one place, the same word in a totally different way in another place. Cannot be in the same story. As a translator with a scientific background, I have to assume the precision of the terminology of the Quran. I cannot attribute to Allah randomness. يعني عشوائية في انتقاء المفردات. لا تليق بالله سبحانه وتعالى. وما قدر الله حق قدره. صح؟ فلا بد أن الكاتب لهذه الكلمات يعي ما يقول، فيستخدم الفعل راودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسه، يعني راود عن، سنراود عن بنفس المعنى. لا يمكن أن تكون متعارضة أو مختلفة. هذه كانت الكرايسيس الحقيقية. هذه كانت المشكلة المعضلة، الثورة. فعلمت في تلك اللحظة أننا لم نفهم القرآن بعد. وبعدها كررت المسبحة. The whole مسبحة broke up. And I had literally 157 questions about Surah Yusuf that were never answered by the books of tafsir. It took me about a year. Surah Yusuf alone. And I kept working on it in the last 5 years to keep improving it and adding to it and so on and so forth. But that was the beginning. The gateway opened. And now I could understand, okay, I should not hold these books of tafsir as sacred because they're wrong. The biggest question came as I kept translating and changing the story, because the story turned out to be absolutely not related to what they told us. Absolutely nothing to do with what they told us. There's no sex. There are no dreams. Just a whole bunch of different issues brought up by the story as wahi to Muhammad. The word wahi means something different, I found out. I came to ayah 102. So ayah 102, if you memorize Surah Yusuf, ذلك من أنباء الغيب نوحيه إليك وما كنت لديهم إذ أجمعوا أمرهم وهم يمكرون. I asked myself, غيب? That means at the time of revealing this surah, this story كانت من أنباء الغيب. يعني إيش من أنباء الغيب؟ غيب لا يعلمه أحد. أخرجه الله ليتعلمه محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. هذا معنى كلمة الغيب. ذلك من أنباء الغيب. يعني Allah is taking pride or bragging that I'm sharing something with you brand new. ذلك من أنباء الغيب نوحيه إليك. عدت إلى كتب التفاسير فوجدت أن كلها 100% كلها the books of tafsir said no, that was not غيب. They brought the story of Yusuf from the Torah and applied it to the story, or to chapter 12, Surah 12 of the Quran. And I hope you're feeling goosebumps right now, because that's exactly how I felt at that time. I felt شعرت أن الله يؤكد لي أنهم لم يفهموا القرآن. وما قدر الله حق قدره. Allah is telling us ذلك من أنباء الغيب. And every book of tafsir said, no, that was not ghaib. That was already in the book of Torah, the corrupted, al-muharrafa. I said, no. I have a major problem on my hand and we need to restart. But I didn't know how to restart, so I made a lot of dua. Alhamdulillah. The rest of the story is that we have a very significant methodology. Remember, I'm a scientific background. So when I do something, I need a methodology. So it's repeatable, so that other people understand how I'm thinking to reach my conclusions. I need bayinat. How do we extract the evidence? Bayinat. I need specific process I go through, step after step after step. And then I ask myself a very, very, very basic question no one has asked. Not a single person has asked. The following question as follows. Don't we all believe the Quran is very unique, unlike anything else of this world? Do we believe this or not? القرآن فريد من نوعه. يعني القرآن تحدى الإنس والجن على أن يأتوا بمثله أو فأتوا بسورة من مثله، يعني 3 آيات سورة الكوثر، وأكد أنهم لن يستطيعوا. فإذا هو فريد من نوعه. يعني إيش؟ يعني لما أتعامل مع القرآن, when I deal with the Quran, the way I interact with the Quran cannot be the same way I interact with anything else. I'll give you an example. If you're walking in the desert, in the middle of the desert, and you find an object that looks like a microwave, but it's unlike anything else you've seen before. It's the size of a microwave, but so different than anything else. Doesn't have a door, has different things you may be able to do with it, but you have no clue what it is. And you study it and you say, no, it's not of this world. It's sent to us by aliens. How do you deal with this? Do you go to your home and get the user manual for your fridge and use it for this new object? You know this is unique. This is unlike anything else humans have done. Do you use the same user manual for your refrigerator or your microwave to operate it, to use it? No way. So what's the solution? As a scientist, I ask myself, is Allah fair? Of course, Allah is fair. That means the methodology for using this must be inside it, no other way. The methodology for using it, يعني إيش؟ يعني when you try to engage the Quran, تدبر القرآن, لابد من منهجية من داخل القرآن. لا أستطيع أن أطبق منهجية تفسير الشعر أو الأدب العربي على القرآن. خطأ قاتل إذا فكرت بهذه الطريقة. I'm speaking as a scientist. يعني, what does that mean? That means my children, my oldest has a master's degree and my second one has a lawyer degree, doctorate in law and different educational levels. They think this way. So if we're presenting Islam today, we have to answer their questions, and their questions are like this. You claim the Quran is unique. Why are you treating it like a book of poetry? يعني إيش؟ يعني أعطيكم مثل. I'm a software engineer. So when I read a software program, it has a bunch of instructions. ماشي? Bunch of instructions for the computer to do something. We call it the operating system of the computer. If someone finds my printed computer program and starts reading it as if it was poetry, what would we say about that someone? We'd say that's absolutely nuts. What are you doing? This is exactly what the books of tafsir have done. And I'm not talking down about them. I'm saying it's a major mistake. Why? The Quran is like software for us. يعني إيش? يعني if you really allow the Quran to permeate, to build your person, your thinking, your outlook, your worldview, you become a different creature. You become like a computer and you bring the operating system, Windows, to run it. Without this operating system, you're just an empty hardware. So somebody can give you a fake operating system, and you operate as a human being, but you end up as a slave With this operating system, that's the Quran, we are directly connected to the creator of us and the Quran. So it becomes an operating system for us. It teaches us how to be, how to think, how to reflect. This is the final conclusion, alhamdulillah, of where we reached after 6 years of this research. Where did we start? By assuming that Allah cannot be inconsistent in the usage of terminology. راودته عن نفسه سنراود عنه أباه. Cannot be inconsistent. There must be consistency in the Quran. ما بعرف واضح ولا ما واضح. This is my mission. My mission is to bring this confidence in the Quran and the methodology that's a gift from Allah. Not a gift from me. I'm nobody. But I feel the responsibility to bring it out and to talk about it. And inshallah, there will be people who listen. يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء. Allah chooses. يخلق ما يشاء ويختار. أنا أدعوكم بصدق وبأمانة وبتواضع أن تسمعوا وتصححوني. يعني ساهموا في محاولتنا لأجيالنا القادمة أن نقدم الإسلام بمنطق يقبلوه، ليس بتغيير الإسلام ولكن بفهم أعمق لكلام الله سبحانه وتعالى. وإذا استطعنا فالكل رابحون والكل منتصرون، وإذا فشلنا باختلافاتنا فكلنا خاسرون. لأن أعداد الشباب، أنا كنت في أمريكا وكنت في السعودية وكنت في البلاد العربية ورأيت بعيني في بعض البلدان الإسلامية عدد الملحدين من الشباب 36%. شفت إحصائية بعيني. أين هم؟ لماذا؟ لأننا لم نجدد فهم هذا الكتاب العظيم الذي بين أيدينا. اعتمدنا على تفاسير وضعت منذ 1200 سنة، جزاهم الله خير، كان سقفهم المعرفي بطريقة محددة. لسنا ملزمون بالبقاء ضمن هذا السقف. هذا اللي أقول. My kids know a lot more than I do about this world. So I have to stay up to them, up to date with what they know and bring them Islam and the Quran in a way that matches what they realize of the truth. فنقدم هذا القرآن بما يتماشى مع الواقع الذي نعيش فيه. أحد المقاطع الأخيرة التي تكلمت فيها عن quantum physics and the nature of reality، فلسفة الوجود، المسائل هذه معظم الشباب الآن غاطسين فيها، ولم أسمع أحد من علماء المسلمين يتكلم فيها بوضوح من القرآن. أريد آيات من القرآن. الحمد لله قدمنا الكثير من الأدلة من القرآن على بعض النظريات الحديثة، وبحمد الله قدمنا نظرية أحدث مما قالوا. القرآن يتكلم عن أشياء لم يتكلموا عنها بعد. اسمعوا لو سمحتم المقطع الذي يتكلم عن nature of reality. وفي الدروس الخاصة التي أقدمها كل يوم أحد تكلمت لمدة 3 شهور الماضية عن شيء اسمه نفس centric universe، أن كل منا يعيش في عالمه الخاص، العالم المخلوق لأجلك. القرآن يتكلم عن هذا؟ نعم، القرآن يتكلم عن هذا. واقع، يعني حقيقة الواقع التي وصفها القرآن بتفاصيل وبمئات الآيات، مئات الآيات، مذهلة لدرجة أن يعني صعب الإنسان يتصورها، ولكنها موجودة لو بحثنا عنها. فبدأ كل هالكلام بدأ بإيش؟ بالآية من سورة يوسف التي قالت آيات للسائلين. سورة يوسف تقول آيات للسائلين، معناته هذا تشجيع على السؤال، على الأسئلة، على التساؤل، وعلى البحث عن الحقيقة. وليس عيبا أن نسأل،